Every prisoner in the yard dropped what they were doing and went completely silent because the most feared man in Clinton Correctional had just walked straight toward Tupac and pointed directly at him. It was 1995 and Tupac had just arrived at Clinton Correctional Facility. Nobody knew how this was going to end. If you are into these untold Tupac stories, subscribe right now. We drop new ones every single day. The prison yard at Clinton Correctional Facility was never quiet. Metal clanging against metal, voices bouncing off concrete walls, boots scraping against the ground. The constant low hum of hundreds of men trying to survive another day behind bars. But on that particular afternoon in late 1995, everything stopped. Every single sound, every conversation, every movement. Because Marcus Webb had just stood up from his bench and started walking across the yard toward the new arrival. Tupac Shakur had been at Clinton Correctional Facility for only a few weeks at that point. He was 24 years old, one of the most recognized voices in music, and now just another inmate in a gray jumpsuit, trying to figure out how to survive a place that had broken stronger men than him. He had kept to himself since arriving, learned the layout of the facility, studied the rhythms of the place, who ate where, who walked where, who owned which corner of the yard. He had been careful, deliberate, smart. He knew that the biggest mistake a new inmate could make was to move too fast or talk too much before understanding the rules. But understanding the rules and being left alone to follow them were two very different things. Marcus Webb was 31 years old and had been inside Clinton Correctional Facility for 6 years. He was not the largest man in the facility, and he was not the loudest. What Marcus had was something far more valuable in that environment than size or volume. He had time. He had history. He had the kind of reputation that gets built slowly, quietly, through 1,000 small moments that add up to something unmistakable. When Marcus walked through the yard, men moved, not because they were told to, not because there was a rule about it, because they had learned, one way or another, that it was simply the right thing to do. Marcus had heard about the new arrival before Tupac even stepped through the gates. Everybody had, and Marcus had a very specific view about famous people coming into his facility. Fame on the outside meant nothing on the inside. Actually, it was worse than nothing. It was a liability. It made guards watch you differently. It made other inmates want to test you. It disrupted the balance of things. And Marcus Webb had spent 6 years carefully building and maintaining that balance. Tupac was standing near the far fence doing nothing in particular, just taking in the yard the way a man does when he is still learning the geography of a new and dangerous place. When he noticed the shift, it was subtle at first. Conversations around him tapering off, eyes moving in one direction. That particular quality of silence that means something is about to happen. He turned around and saw Marcus coming toward him. Alone, no crew surrounding him, no performance of power. Just a man walking with the calm certainty of someone who had never once in 6 years needed to raise his voice to make a point. Behind Marcus, spread across the yard like a slow tide, every other inmate had stopped moving and turned to watch. Marcus stopped about 4 feet away. He looked at Tupac for a long moment without saying anything. Then he spoke. "You have been walking around this yard for 2 weeks like you are still figuring out whether this place is real." Marcus said, "I am here to tell you it is real, and in real places real rules apply. I do not care what you did on the outside. I do not care what your name means out there. In here, your name means exactly what you make it mean and nothing else. So the question I have for you right now, standing here in front of every man in this yard, is a simple one. Who are you in here?" The yard was absolutely silent. 200 men waiting. Guards in the towers watching without intervening. A question hanging in the air that was not really a question at all. It was a test, a declaration, a line drawn in the dirt of that concrete yard that Tupac was being asked, in front of everyone, to either step over or step back from. Tupac did not answer right away. He held Marcus's gaze and let the silence sit there between them. And then he said something that nobody in that yard expected. "I am the same person I was the day I walked in here," Tupac said, his voice even and unhurried. "The walls did not change that. You do not change that. Nobody in here changes that. I know who I am. The better question is whether you are asking because you actually want to know or because you need everyone watching to see you ask." The silence after those words was a different kind of silence. Not the held breath silence of men waiting for a fight. Something more complicated than that. Marcus stared at Tupac for what felt like a very long time. His expression did not change. His posture did not shift. He simply looked at the younger man standing in front of him with the same unhurried attention he had given everything for 6 years. Then Marcus nodded once slowly, the way a man nods when he has received an answer that surprised him, but that he can respect. He turned and walked back across the yard. No words, no signal to the men watching. Just a man returning to where he had come from, and the yard slowly, cautiously began to breathe again. Conversations restarted, movement resumed, but something had changed in the air of that place, and every man standing there felt it. In the days that followed, nobody bothered Tupac. Not because he had fought anyone, not because he had made threats or aligned himself with a powerful group or traded anything for protection, but because the men in that yard had watched him stand in front of Marcus Webb, in front of all of them, with nothing but his own words and his own stillness, and they had seen something they recognized and respected, a man who knew exactly who he was regardless of where he was standing. Marcus Webb never approached Tupac again, but 3 weeks after that afternoon in the yard, a guard reported overhearing Marcus tell another inmate simply that the new arrival understood more about this place than most men who had been here for years. That afternoon in the yard at Clinton Correctional Facility was never reported in any newspaper. It never made any interview. It was not the kind of story that travels far beyond the walls where it happened. But the men who were there that day carried it with them. Because what they witnessed was not a fight. It was not a display of physical dominance or a performance of toughness. It was something rarer and harder to define. A young man, stripped of every external marker of who he was, standing in one of the most unforgiving environments imaginable, and refusing to become someone different just because the circumstances demanded it. That is the story of who Tupac Shakur was. Not the albums, not the headlines, not the mythology that grew around him. Just a man who knew himself well enough that no wall, no yard, no test could make him forget it. If this story reached you the way it was meant to reach you, then you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button right now because we drop untold stories like this every single day. Stories that never made the news. Stories that lived inside walls and traveled only by word of mouth until now. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think Tupac was really thinking in that moment before he answered. We read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about standing your ground without throwing a single punch, share this video with them right now. We will see you in the next one.